Good morning. This is the second part of the N4 SQL database integration. This portion of and during this video, I like to show Niagara. Um, and then I'm also really excited about this phenomenal feature called the RDB Archive History Provider, which I'm happy to showcase. But just to go through a quick recap of where we left off. Um, how we set up this connection. This is the host name or domain name for the server computer. In this case, it's actually my own laptop that's hosting the SQL database. This is a SQL login that we created during our last video when we were um, pretty much just focused on the SQL side of things. This was also the password we created using T-SQL in the previous video. I think I went over this during the previous video, but I wasn't, by mistake, I wasn't showing this window, so it's probably it wasn't very helpful. But when Tritium speaks about threads in their drivers in particular, each thread in a multi-threaded operating system like Windows, for example, or Linux, you each thread calls for time from the CPU. So the more threads you allocate to each particular service, the more time, the more processing time that it will use um, from the CPU um, compared to the rest of the services in the station and even the rest of the services in the operating system itself. Now, it doesn't matter if we have lots and lots of data to move across these two systems, SQL and Niagara. It doesn't matter how many threads we put in here. If we don't increase the queue size, we are probably going to end up with queue overflow exceptions. So these two pretty much go hand in hand. If you increase here or if you increase here, you should be mindful to increase the other setting as well. This is purely arbitrary. There is no guideline or standard. In the previous video, I'll focus a little more in threads and queue sizes and how we can uh, view them. So export mode, probably the most important setting here, which always, in my opinion, I always want to choose history ID because it moves the history tables from Niagara to SQL in the same exact format as they are in Niagara. If you choose history type, you're going to end up with only four tables versus one table per point that is trended. But then everything is going to be bunched together. And in my opinion, it's more difficult to work with that way. Perhaps because I'm already so familiar with the way that Niagara stores trends. On the real blocker or the real downside here is that at least as of 4.11, if you choose by history type, you are going to not be able to pull the audit log and the security log and that sort of thing. Only point data. So don't need to worry about anything else here. This instance name is the name of your database over in the SQL Server, default SQL port, and this is the server name, the SQL Server name, which you can also find from your SQL Server instance. And this is the only connector you likely will need. I've not had to use MS SQL, but if you were to use MS SQL for some reason, you need to download another jar module that you'd get from Microsoft. So not gonna do that. Alrighty, on to the stuff that we care about. So the first thing we need to do is export histories. That's why we're gonna go to the history export manager. We This section is super straightforward. If you've ever used any Niagara driver, you are familiar with this screen already. You discover this finds all the histories in your station. Note that that looks just like this, and then you'll select them all, bring them in, and here you configure execution time, and so on. Pretty much like if you've configured a Niagara trend and you've configured its history config object, then this should be pretty straightforward. This portion of the process. Um, so once you have all your histories exported from Niagara to SQL, you're pretty much done. The next step would be, let's go ahead and create a chart. By default, just because I want to make this very obvious, we're only collecting five records of data in in the database. Um, so if we do not have a RDB archive history provider, then our charts are only gonna display very small amount of information. This is like a phenomenal feature that I really like, and I hope that I'm sure it's only going to get better. Um, if you go to services under history, there's an archive history providers that you can select, and right now it's empty. Oh, wrong place. I'm actually looking for the RDB module. So the RDB module will have the correct provider. So here in this folder, we can grab the provider, drop it in the correct location, and I don't pretty sure we don't have to change anything other than we need to locate one more. Enable it. Okay. So now, as you can see, we have a lot more data. However, if we come back to our histories here and we look for analog value 15, and I'm not going to say anything about sorting. I'm starting to regret not choosing the first history on the top. Alright, it's 13, 14, here's 15. So you can see we're bringing a lot more data now. But that data is actually not being stored in Niagara. It's being pulled on demand from SQL. You can see this hasn't changed. We're really still only looking to collect five records The reason why analog value 15 in particular um, has now more is because we asked for it. And we asked the a provider to bring more histories just by changing the time resolution. Now, how can we tell, right, what is going on? Well, the debug service um, is how. I'm gonna go ahead and add. Looks like everything is off, which is okay. This is not a production server, so I'm okay with having everything off so that I can see only the logs for the stuff that matters. Clear the output and let's do last year. And you can see that because we pulled the log and we enabled the log for the RDB provider, history provider, you can see that there is data being moved, being imported from SQL back to Tritium on demand, just so that we can show it on any of the tables or charts that Tritium provides for visualizing trends. So again, it's just fantastic feature to avoid overwhelming your station. And then if you have to provide these history records or back them up or something like that, and you have a large like gigabytes of data, you definitely want to make use of this feature. Thank you so much for watching.